So one day I decided to go to Walmart and get a can of Flex Seal and a few sheets of cardboard, and then I headed home to build a cardboard boat. I had the stuff and I was ready to build. I cut the sheets so I could form them into a boat. I then took my duct tape and I duct taped all around it. I then flipped it over and duct taped that side. I got the base for the boat and positioned it in. I put some duct tape on it, flipped it over again, and put another piece of cardboard on it for support. Now it was ready for the Flex Seal, so I took it to my backyard to be sprayed. I sprayed all around the seams and in every corner until I was done and ready to test it in the creek. Like for part 2. Part 2 of making a cardboard boat and putting it in the creek. So I carried it over to my brother's truck, put it in, and then we headed to the creek. I put on some old shoes in case the boat sank, and then I headed to the creek with my boat. I headed down there and then I picked out my launching area. I picked it out and I put it in the water.
Oh my God,
I got in the boat and it was pretty sturdy. But it wouldn't move, so I tried paddling. And when that didn't work, I got out, dumped the water out, and put the boat in deeper water. I got in again and it crumpled.
Oh God! Oh! He's going under, he's going under. Oh.
My feet were soaked, so I got out, got mad, and threw the boat. And sure enough, then it started to float. It went away. And then I threw a rock. Don't get triggered, we chased it down. So one day I went back to Walmart to retry my failed cardboard boat. I got Gorilla Tape, some duct tape, some cardboard, and bubble wrap. And then I headed home. I also ended up getting this cart because it was fun. I got home and started building my new design. It was going to be a lot more boxy this time, and my plan was to put 2 boxes together. I used Gorilla Tape to tape the seams of the boxes, and then I put them together. And then I flipped it over to tape the bottom. And after that, I cut out the middle piece that was inside the box. And then I covered the whole bottom of the boat in duct tape, and ended up using the whole roll. And then I covered it in bubble wrap, so it would float, I guess. And it was done. I'm running out of time, so part 2 tomorrow. Part 2 of making another cardboard boat. So I put the boat in my brother's truck, and then we headed to the creek. We got there and I got my oar out of the truck and then we headed down. And I was pretty sure my new design would work. We got down, I took off my shoes, and then I put my boat in the water. And my feet got pretty muddy.
Dang.
I got in the boat, but couldn't quite balance my weight. And ended up tipping over.
Even it out. Oh!
So I got up, got the water out of the boat, and tried again. But this time, I fell even harder. So I got out and, well, I tried again. Yeah, it was a pretty big fail. I'm done with boats. I dragged the boat up, hit it a few times, and then for some reason I got in the cold water, ran around, and threw a rock, and dragged the boat home. So one day I went to Walmart, went to the As Seen on TV section, and got some flex tape, then some duct tape, and some cardboard. And I was going to make a cardboard car powered by my hoverboard. I got the flex tape out and started figuring out a design. I formed it into a box and cut the flaps off and tested that. After that, I cut out a head hole and tried to use the flex tape, but that stuff is hard to cut. I took a box, then put it on my box for support. And then I taped it all together with some duct tape too, because the flex seal was being annoying. Cut it all out and then added some wings, and I was ready to ride. My brother also decided to make one, and we rode around together. In cardboard. Yeah, it looked pretty cool, I guess. Us out in the streets in our cardboard boxes. Then we headed out to the road, and we were going to go to an old country road to race. Like for part 2. Part 2 of making cardboard cars. So my brother and I headed out to race on some country road. We got to the road and then pulled up to the start line. And after that, we proceeded to rev our fake engines. And then we were off. I was pulling ahead, bound to win. And then towards the end, I started leaning right and went into the ditch. So one day I went to Walmart to retry my last 2 failed cardboard boat attempts. I got duct tape, Gorilla Tape, and 5 sheets of cardboard, and then I headed home to build it. I felt confident I could make it work. I set the stuff down and began to build. I cut the first sheet and then folded it into a half boat. I then taped up the seams and cut the flaps off. Then I flipped it over and taped up the bottom, and then flipped it back over and pushed another piece into it. I taped them together and then cut the flaps off. Then flipped it over and taped the bottoms together, and then put another piece of cardboard on the bottom for support. And next, I covered the entire bottom of the boat in duct tape to make it waterproof. It was looking pretty good, and I felt pretty confident. I added a piece of cardboard, and it was done. Third time's a charm, like for part 2. Part 2 of making a cardboard boat. So I put the boat in the truck and some flippers, and then we took it down to the creek. I walked down there and put my boat in the water. I then got in, pushed myself off, and used my flippers to row myself. And it worked.
It's working.
I rowed myself out to the middle.
Haha, losers. This is to everyone who said I couldn't make it. I'm in a cardboard boat now.
And then I rowed even further and laid down.
I'm just chilling, bro.
I then decided to see how far I could row it.
Don't know when I met you, but I met you.
I made it pretty far, but the water started to get in and I started to sink.
It's sinking.
It went under and it was pretty freezing.
You know, my boat may have sank, but at the end of the day, I'd call this a success.
I then dragged the boat up and took it home. So one day I grabbed my cardboard car and my hoverboard. I put them both in my car and then headed to Sonic drive-thru. I got there, got out, and got my hoverboard and my cardboard, and then put it on and headed over to order food. I rolled up in my cardboard car like a boss, and then I pressed the button. And eventually someone answered.
Sonic, my name's Hunter. Be my absolute honor to take orders today.
All right, I would like a breakfast burrito and a medium strawberry limeade.
Set a breakfast. All right, is this all complete for orders today?
Yep.
Have a super amazing day.
All right, you too.
And then I waited around my box for my food, and then it said it's on its way.
Hello. That'll be all. All right, thank you.
I got my food and then drove off back to my car. So one day I went to Walmart to get the stuff to make a cardboard treehouse. I got a bunch of tape and a bunch of cardboard, and then I went home to build. I cut one sheet and then folded it into half of a base. And then I added another sheet and taped them together. And then I added a final sheet and started taping down all the flaps. After that, I added a second level of cardboard and did my best to tape it and align it all properly. I then jumped in to tape the inside together, and then got out by crawling under it. I also taped the seam that connected the boxes all around it to better secure the two halves. And then I taped a sheet of cardboard on top of it for the floor. Then flipped it over and got in it to add more cardboard to the base. And after I did all that, I decided to lay down and take a break. And it was done and ready to be put in a tree, like for part 2. Part 2 of making a cardboard treehouse. So I got a ladder and some wood, and then I cut off a tree limb. Then I dragged the box up the ladder and positioned it into the tree, and then started hammering wood in to support it. I put beams all around and then got help, cause yeah.
Good job, guys.
I added some more supports for the floor, and it was ready. I made a door, then I sawed off some excess wood, and got in. And it was really cool. I'd never had a tree house before, so this was pretty amazing. My brother came in and I started to shake it. And then we added an air mattress on top of it. Sub to my YouTube to watch me spend the night in it. So one day I got a bunch of tape in a box and then I took it outside to build a small boat. I flipped it over and covered the entire bottom in tape. And then I put tape all around the sides to waterproof the whole boat. I then flipped it back over and cut off all the flaps and then taped them into the boat. And added a bunch of tape along the edges to seal it. And then I added some balloons just for fun. Then I picked it up and put it in my brother's truck, and then we headed to the creek to test it out. I walked all the way down there, put it in the water, got in,
Oh my god. Oh, you're already taking in water, dude.
And it sank. So I dumped it and tried again. And it didn't work. So I popped a balloon and then I skipped a rock. So one day I got an air mattress, some cardboard, some tape, and I started making a cardboard boat. I started by taping one sheet of cardboard on the edge. And then I added another sheet on the end and taped it down. After that, I added one last edge piece and taped it down all around. Then it was done, and I picked it up and put it in my brother's truck, and we headed down to the creek and carried it down to go test it.
Dude, let's just sail off right there.
I put it in the water, and then I got in and started rowing. And I rowed out decently far.
Dylan?
But any further, I was headed for a current, so I made my way back. And then we both got in to sail, like for part 2. Part 2 of riding in a cardboard boat. So now my brother got on with me and we rowed out.
Oh god. Dude, this is so weird.
I waved goodbye to land, and then we rowed to another shore. But then we had the idea to row into the big current, so we both got in again and started rowing. We made it in the current, and it was pretty fun.
Oh god. Oh god.
We were spinning around.
Oh god.
Oh, and almost hit a log.
Back to another current. Start pushing.
We eventually got it back to land and then pulled the boat back towards the bridge. So one day I was bored in quarantine and decided to take some of my cardboard and make a cardboard stair slide. I taped the first piece down and then got an air mattress and placed it at the bottom of the stairs because safety first, don't try this at home. I then added a second piece, taped it down, and then added a third, and then a fourth. After that, I threw a bunch of pillows down, and it was done. So I went down.
That was insane.
And then I went down again. And tossed the pillow to my brother so he could go down. I went another time. And then my older brother went. And we just went a bunch more times. So one day I wanted to make a cardboard saw like the paper saw I made. So I traced out a blade, cut it out, and then screwed it onto the angle grinder. And then I was ready to cut some fruit. I turned on my saw and started in on the apple. And it was working pretty well, so I kept going. And eventually I started in on the grapefruit, which ended up ruining my blade. So I took it off and made a new one from a cereal box. And then I screwed it onto the grinder and started trying to cut the cereal box in half. And it did pretty well and almost cut it entirely in half. And after that I started back in on the grapefruit, which ended up ruining this blade too. So I ripped the grapefruit in half and then threw it in the woods, and also threw the rotten apple in the woods. So one day I went to Walmart to get the stuff to make my biggest cardboard boat yet. I got a lot of tape and a lot of cardboard, and then I left and went home to start building. I set up one sheet to start, and then I added another. I taped it all together, and then I added a final piece. Taped that piece down, and then I taped all the flaps down. And then after that, I started adding a second story of cardboard on top of this one to make it look more cool, like a ship. I put the final piece on and then taped all around it to seal it together. And I taped all these flaps down as well. And then I got in with another sheet of cardboard to tape down the base. And then I flipped the boat over and started adding as much tape as possible to the bottom to try and waterproof it. And I ran out. Like for part 2 where I put it in the creek, or watch the full video on my YouTube later today. Cardboard boat part 2. So I picked up the boat and put it in the bed of my brother's truck, and then took it down to the creek, got it out, and carried it down. I put it in, the water was already leaking when I tried to get in, so I pushed it over to a ledge and tried to get in from there, but it just sank. And I tried to row in it, but it was just a fail. So then I got out, pulled it to shore, folded it up, and then took it home for repairs. Like if I should try again. So one day I went to Walmart to get the stuff to retry my failed cardboard boat attempt. I got a bunch of tape and a pretty good amount of cardboard. And then I left, went home, and started building. I first began by setting up one sheet and taping it down. And then I added a second sheet and used a lot of tape to tape it to the first one. After that, I connected the two with a final sheet of cardboard and used a lot of tape to secure it. Next, I folded down all the flaps with a bunch of tape to make it thicker and float better. Then I flipped it over to tape the bottom, and I also added the base sheet and taped that down too. I finished taping that and then flipped it back over to tape the bottom up, and also added another sheet of cardboard for more support. Then finished off the boat by taping up the entire bottom to waterproof it. And it was done and ready to be tested in the creek. Like for part 2 or just watch the full video on my YouTube at Dylan Ayres. Cardboard boat part 2. So I picked up the boat and put it in my brother's truck along with an oar. Then we went down to the creek and I carried it down. Then I walked out to my launching point, got in, and pushed off.
Good job for you.
It was working.
I'm doing it. I always knew I could.
I kept on rowing and it eventually started to leak.
It was just a slight bit of water coming in. Ever so slight.
But I still kept on rowing. I was approaching a current, so I rowed it to land and dragged it all the way back.
It worked.
I rowed in it some more, and then I drug it up. Full videos on my YouTube at Dylan Ayres. So one day I wanted to make a tree house out of duct tape, so I went to Walmart and bought a lot of duct tape. Then I went home, got a ladder, and climbed up the tree and was going to start by filling these 2 holes up with duct tape. I started with this one, stood on it, and then did the other one, and stood on it. And then I thought I was going to make a wall of duct tape, but didn't, so instead I tried to make a rope ladder of duct tape, and that failed. And the next day I decided to just finish the whole thing off with cardboard because duct tape was too hard. So I placed the first sheet down, taped it, and it looked like this. And then I took another sheet up, placed it down, taped it, and it looked like this. I then added one final piece, and it was done. Pretty cool looking and perfectly stable. Here's from the inside, and here's the outside. Let me know what else I should do. So one day someone commented to use my waterproof spray on a cardboard boat. So I found this cardboard box and taped it up on all sides to seal it. Then I cut out a hole for me to sit in, and then taped that. And then I started spraying all the waterproofing stuff. I sprayed it all around and on every single side until it was done. And then I let it sit overnight and came back the next day, put it in my brother's truck, and took it on down to the creek. And when I put the box in the water, it was still dry. So I set it down, got in, and started rowing. And it was completely working. I went out under the bridge and then further and then just chilled for a second and kept on rowing. This was probably one of the best cardboard boats I've ever made. And I just kept on rowing forever.
Mission aboard.
So one day someone commented to make another cardboard boat, but this time use Flex Seal. So I used the same broken one thinking the Flex Seal would just fix it. I sprayed the whole thing, gave it a coat on this side, and then that side. And when it was done, I let it dry and came back the next day. I then put it in my brother's truck and I took it on down to the creek. I put it in the water, got in, and started to row. I rowed all the way out through under the bridge, and it was pretty cool. I was just chilling, and eventually water started to leak in, so I tried to get out and fell. And then I drug it home. So one day I went to Walmart and got a bunch of cardboard to make one of those cardboard tunnel slides on my stairs like I've seen before, and tape, and then left, went home, and started building it. I taped the first box down at the top and was adding glow sticks all along on the way down. I then taped the second box to the top one and repeated this process for a long time until eventually I was done. The slide was looking pretty cool. I threw some pillows down to break my fall and went down it. And the first one was kind of anticlimactic, but my brother went down pretty fast and almost hurt himself. And on his next go, he basically destroyed the slide. So I had to remove this piece and put down a new flooring that made it actually faster. Here's a POV of me sliding down. And here's my final go. So one day I ordered this stuff called Great Stuff, which is basically expandable foam insulation. And my goal was to build a boat out of it. Not just any boat, a cardboard boat. Because a while back I had a series on TikTok where I tried to make cardboard boats float, and I was never very successful. But I used the best cardboard boat design I knew how to make, and then I was going to cover the entire outside in the Great Stuff. And hopefully it'll float. So I finished taping up the entire bottom, like this. And I already had a decent looking boat. Then we covered the entire bottom in the Great Stuff. And then later we covered the rest of the sides. And when I came back the next day, it was solid looking. And it was ready to be tested in the creek. I walked it down and then got in. And I started to float away. It was working flawlessly without any problem. So I just kept on rowing and having a good time. And then I about ran into a tree. And then I started heading out further. And it was the best boat I'd ever made. I just kept going. One day I took an air mattress and a bunch of cardboard and decided to make a cardboard air mattress type boat. And my goal was to make it to where you couldn't see any of the air mattress, so it just looked like a complete cardboard boat. I got it completely finished and it looked pretty cool. I took it out to the lake, then I jumped on and paddled my way out. And it was working. I was smooth sailing, then I got blown into the trees, but eventually pushed my way out and made my way around the dock thinking I was going to dock it, but ended up just going all the way around and then headed for these rocks, where I parked the boat for a little while, got off, and then kept going. And I went all the way around this little peninsula and went to shore. Let me know what else I should make. So one day I bought a ton of cardboard sheets at Walmart to build the biggest cardboard boat I could make while still functioning. And I used to make cardboard boats all the time, but I hadn't made one in a while and I felt like making a huge one. I pieced the boat together, taped it up completely, taped all the flaps down, flipped it over, taped this, and then put a bunch of sheets in the bottom. And after that was taped completely, we flipped it back over and then added another sheet, taped that down fully, and then I decided to add some Flex Seal. I did this to help waterproof the boat, and then I sprayed this on there. But I ended up coming back the next day and adding another coat anyway because it felt flimsy still. After that was done drying, it was time to test it out at the creek. I put it in the water, got in, and laid down. That was the only way I could be stable. The current wasn't very strong, so I tried to row without much luck, and then I saw a leak, and the boat started to collapse in. I kept on pushing, trying to stay afloat, but with no luck, we eventually went down, and I was never seen again. Not really, but I was pretty sad.
So one day I set out to make a fully functional cardboard boat with a motor attached. I went to Walmart, got a bunch of cardboard, and then I went home to figure out how I was going to be able to support this motor on a cardboard boat. The cardboard's too flimsy and the battery in the motor is really heavy. It will have to attach to the boat somehow like this. So I just got to work building around the motor with a bunch of layers of cardboard. You know, flipping it, taping it, adding even more cardboard, taping all that down and around, adding some more, then some more, until eventually I called it a day, and the next day I had to go get more supplies to make it even sturdier. This boat has to be completely strong enough to hold me, the battery, and the motor, so we have to make it float. We reinforced the bottom with double-sided cardboard like this, then taped that all down and the entire bottom to help waterproof it before we added the Flex Seal and the great stuff. I started by spraying the entire bottom with blue Flex Seal and then some white to make it look frosted, and then I started on the great stuff. My friend Austin then sprayed it to look like a flaming Cheeto, and all we have to do is wait for it to dry and then test it tomorrow. So one day it was part 2 of making a working cardboard boat with a real motor. We Flex Sealed and great stuffed the entire cardboard boat, and the next day it looked ready to float. My friends and I loaded it up and took it out to the pond where we would test it out. The motor was spinning, we put it in the water, and I was off after a little push from this oar. The boat was holding up amazingly well, and the engine was pushing me surprisingly really fast. I couldn't believe it. I'd made the first ever cardboard boat with an engine. Then this RC boat zoomed by me and I conned the boat back to shore.